Hi everyone, welcome. Welcome to module 5 of the SRW course. In this module, we are going to discuss about spanning tree protocol and its purpose in networks. Redundancy is very common in network implementations and provides alternate routes in a network if a switch goes down. Redundancy ensures that users of the network would not experience any disruption of service. While solving the single point of failure problem, it creates a new one called as a layer 2 loop. A layer 2 loop creates chaos in the network. It can happen and propagate quickly and may bring down the entire network. STP is designed specifically to eliminate layer 2 loops in your network. This module discusses causes of loops and the various types of spanning tree protocols. So let us see what STP is going to do to prevent these loops. These are the different topics that we are going to discuss as part of this module. We are going to talk about purpose of STP, the different STP operations, and the evolution of STP. So let us start with purpose of STP first. So why do we need STP? What is the reason that we should use STP in networks? So in this case, redundancy is an important part of the hierarchical design because it eliminates the single point of failure and it prevents disruption of network service to the users. Now, redundancy means addition of physical paths, and also logical redundancy will be part of the design. Having these alternate physical paths for data to traverse the network makes it possible for users to access network resources despite path disruption. But the problem is when you add redundancy to a network, especially at layer 2, if you don't have any type of spanning tree protocol working on it, it will create a loop. Now, for the network to function properly, Ethernet LANs require a loop-free topology with a single path between any two devices. A loop in an Ethernet LAN can cause continued propagation of Ethernet frames until a link is disrupted and breaks the loop. Now, for this specific reason, STP is developed. So, spanning tree protocol, usually called as STP, is a loop prevention network protocol that allows for redundancy while creating a loop-free layer 2 topology. What it does is it logically blocks physical loops in a layer 2 network, preventing frames from circling the network forever. We have multiple examples to see how STP works, or the different steps in performing in the implementation of STP. In case if a link fails or if a device fails, STP will recalculate the path again, and then it will open up the previously blocked ports or logically blocked ports. Now, what are the different issues that you generally face with redundant switch links? As I told you, the main reason why a network administrator tends to use redundancy is to eliminate the single point of failure. And if there are multiple paths that are available between the devices, and if there is no spanning tree implemented, obviously there is a high possibility that a layer 2 loop occurs. What happens is if it happens, it will result in the MAC address table instability, link saturation, and high CPU utilization on switches and end devices, which results in the network becoming unusable. It seriously degrades the performance of the network. Generally, layer 2 does not have a mechanism to recognize and eliminate endlessly looping frames. Like in layer 3, we have the TTL field in the IP headers, which will limit a packet's lifetime to some certain limit. So it does not allow a packet to roam the network forever. We don't have such mechanisms in layer 2. So STP was actually specifically developed to prevent such loops for layer 2 Ethernet. There is also something called as a broadcast storm. Earlier, we discussed about the broadcast domains, collision domains. So a broadcast storm is an abnormally high number of broadcasts overwhelming the network during a specific amount of time. You know that we use ARP and other protocols in layer 2, which create broadcasts. So these broadcasts, if they are not controlled well, can create a broadcast storm. These broadcast storms can disable a network within seconds by overwhelming switches and end devices. Why they are caused? They can be caused by a faulty network interface card or even from a layer 2 loop in the network. So in order to tackle these things, in order to make sure that a layer 2 loop does not happen and the network is not going to be degraded, we have something called as spanning tree algorithm. This STP is based on an algorithm, which is your STA, invented by Radia Perlman while working for Digital Equipment Corporation and published in the 1985 paper, an algorithm for distributed computation of a spanning tree in an extended LAN. Her spanning tree algorithm, called as STA, creates a loop-free topology by selecting a single root bridge where all other switches determine a single least cost path. I'll show you how it is done, so don't panic. It's very simple actually. It's a very good idea. So STP actually prevents loops from occurring by configuring a loop-free path through the network, using the strategically placed blocking state ports. The switches running STP are able to compensate for failures by dynamically unblocking the previously blocked ports and permitting traffic to traverse the alternate paths. We'll take a simple topology and I'll show you what are the different steps through which STP is going to be done or STP is implemented. And I'll show you the working of those, each and one of those steps. So you'll get a better understanding. What do you mean by this root bridge, and what is this least cost path, and what are these blocking state ports? Okay, so I'll show you this. What are the steps in your STA? There are 4 steps. The first thing is select a root bridge. So of all the switches that belong to the same broadcast domain, there is one root bridge that is selected. After that, you block the redundant paths. That means the STP, it will ensure that there is only one logical path between all destinations on the network. How it does? It actually intentionally blocks the redundant paths that might cause a loop. So when a port is blocked, user data is prevented from entering or leaving that particular port. The third step is you create a loop-free topology. That means that there is only one single path available from the root switch to all the other switches. There is only one path. There are no multiple paths between any 2 switches. The last step is, in case of a failure, if a link goes down, if one port goes down, then your STP should be able to recalculate the entire thing, and it should reopen the ports that are blocked in the earlier calculation, so that there is always a path between the networks or between the switches in the network. So let me take this particular topology. You can see here, it is there are multiple switches that are present there. They have different paths among them. So this is an example of a redundant network where there are multiple paths possible between different destinations. Now remember, the first step, what we need to do is, I need to select the root bridge. Here we will discuss about what is the criteria for selecting the root bridge. How do you select it? We will discuss it towards the course of this particular video. But first, imagine that you select one as a root bridge. For our explanation purpose, let us assume that S1 has been selected as the root bridge here. That is the second step. Now, if you see, there are some green arrows showing that which is the best path from each one of the switches to S1. Now, once you've selected what is the best path, you then block the redundant paths. So if you see here, from S7, the path is S7 to S8, S8 to S5, and S5 to S1. So in this case, S4 to S8 and S4 to S5, these 2 paths are redundant paths. That means they might cause a loop. So what STP does is, it will actually block these 2 ports. If you can see, these are called as blocked ports. Blocked ports means traffic is not allowed to enter or leave through those ports. After once you do that, you have a loop-free technology. You will have a loop-free topology. If you observe at that particular diagram, there is always one path available between any 2 switches. If you take from S1 to S2, only this is the path. You can't go through anywhere else. Similarly, if you take from S1 to S7, so S1, S5, S8, S7. If you take S1 to S6, S1, S5, S6. This is called as a loop-free topology. Now, basically, we implement redundancy to make sure that in case of a link fails or a device fails, there is always an alternative path for the traffic to traverse the network. In that case, if at all a link failure happens, your STP now, what it does is, you can see earlier this port of S4 is a blocked port. But since this link is now disabled, it will open this port and the traffic will be forwarded via in this direction to S1. So this is how your STP works. Let us see each and every one of these things in detail. What are the different operations that STP is going to carry on? Now, steps to a loop-free topology. Using the STA, your algorithm, the STP builds a loop-free topology in a 4-step process. We will discuss each one of these. We will discuss each one of these steps in detail with some examples. First one is elect the root bridge. Second thing is elect the root ports. Then elect the designated ports, and whatever ports are remaining, then mark them as alternate or blocked ports. Now, for these operations to be done through your STA, what is these switches exchange something called as BPDUs, Bridge Protocol Data Units. So these BPDUs are exchanged between switches to share information among themselves and their connections. These play a very critical role in for election of the root bridge, root ports, designated ports, and alternate ports. Each one of these BPDUs contains a bridge ID. We call it as BID, which identifies the switch that sent the BPDU. This BID is once again involved in all of these steps. The BID contains a priority value, the MAC address of the switch, and an extended system ID. Now, there is something called as the lowest BID value is determined by the combination of these three fields. Let me elaborate it when the time comes. I will explain it when the time is right. For now, please remember that to carry out these operations, the STA uses something called as BPDUs, abbreviated as Bridge Protocol Data Units, and these BPDUs carry the bridge ID BID, and that BID plays a crucial role for selection of the root bridge and root ports. So this is what it is contained in your BID. The first one is something called as bridge priority. The default priority value for all the Cisco switches is the decimal value 32768. The range is 0 to 61440 and increments of 4096. Usually, the switch with the lowest priority is preferable. A bridge priority of 0 takes precedence. That means you take it first. You select it first over all other bridge priorities. The second one is something called the second field, which is of 12 bits in length, is called as extended system ID. This is there to identify the VLAN which this switch belongs to, or for which this BPDU coming from. It is going to identify the VLAN. And the last field, which is 48 bits in length, is your MAC address. So when two switches are configured with the same priority and have the same extended system ID, the switch having the lowest MAC address will have the lower BID. We'll talk about that. Why do we need to consider all these things? For now, remember that the BID consists of 3 parts. The first one is the bridge priority. The second one is the extended system ID, and the third one is the MAC address of the switch. Okay. So let us start our explanation with the first operation, electing the root bridge. Now consider this scenario here. What is happening is the STA designates a single switch as the root bridge and uses it as the reference point for all path calculations. Now the switches exchange the BPDUs to build the loop-free topology, beginning with the selection of the root bridge. First, all switches which belong to the same broadcast domain participate in the election process. After a switch boots, it begins to send out BPDU frames for every 2 seconds. These BPDU frames contain the BID of the sending switch and the BID of the root bridge known as the root ID. Generally, the switch with the lowest BID value will become the root bridge for that particular network. At the first instance, all switches declare themselves as the root bridge with their own BID set as the root ID because they haven't selected the root bridge first. But eventually, once it is done, the switches learn through the exchange of the BPDUs which switch has the lowest BID, and then they will agree on one root bridge. In this example, there are 3 switches, S1, S2, and S3. So of these 3 switches, if you can see here, the bridge priority is given as 32769, 32769, and 24577. By default, the switch which has the lowest BID, that here is the priority value, which has the lowest priority, will be selected as the root bridge for this network. So based on that, S1 is selected as the root bridge for this of S2 and S3. Of the 3, S1 is selected as your root bridge. Now, because As I told you earlier, the default BID of Cisco switches is 32768. It is always possible that two or more switches will have the same priority. So it comes to a tie. In the scenario where the priorities are the same, the switch with the lowest MAC address will become the root bridge. But if an administrator want one particular switch to be as the root bridge, he can always configure that particular switch with a lower priority. Now, once again, take this example. We have S1, S2, S3. Consider that all the three switches are having the same priority value. So there is no way to tell which has the lowest priority. The next step to define which will become the root bridge is the MAC address. If you check out, there are the three MAC addresses for these three switches. S1 is 00A0 and all threes, and this has all twos and this has all ones. When the MAC address comparison is done, S2, because it has the lowest MAC address in the hexadecimal value, S2 will become the root bridge for this particular network. So if you have a tie with the priorities, to break that particular tie, you select the switch with the lowest MAC address. Then once you finalize which switch is going to be the root bridge for this network, then you have to go calculating your root path cost. When the root bridge has been selected, so the STA starts determining the best paths to the root bridge from all destinations in the broadcast domain. So from all the switches that are there, you need to find the best path. The path information, we usually call it as internal root path cost, is determined by the sum of all individual port costs along the path from the switch to the root bridge. If I'm talking about S1 till S5, if I want to find out the path cost, I need to find out for each path cost till it reaches the destination. When a switch receives the BPDU, it adds the ingress port cost of the segment to determine its internal root path cost. So it might seem to be a little bit confusing, but it is straightforward. This is the table which actually gives you the default costs. Now, these costs are actually associated with the speed of the port. If you have a 10 giga port, the cost is 2. If you have 1 Gbps port, the default cost is 4. If you have 100 Mbps port, the default cost is 19. And if you have a 10 Mbps port, the default cost is 100. We have another comparison here. We call it as Rapid Spanning Tree Protocol, RSTP. The costs are a little bit slightly different. So this is how, and I'll show you how to calculate this path. Consider this example. Now here, S1 is actually designated as the root bridge for this network. Now it is up to these two switches, S2 and S3, to elect the root ports. Okay. So in order to find out what is going to be the root port is the closest, or is the port closest to the root bridge in terms of overall cost to the root bridge. Now consider this example. S2 has two paths, S2 to S1. It has a direct path to S1. It has a path through S3 to S1. In order to consider, there are two ports here. That means for S2 to send traffic to S1, it can either send via F0 by 1 and it can also send via F0 by 2 ports. Now, how does S2 designate one of these two ports as the root port? That means the port through which the traffic is sent out towards the root bridge. How does it select among these two? For that, it will calculate the root cost or the path cost. Now, if you consider F0 by 1, that is path 1, because I told you in the earlier table, the default value is 19, the path cost is 19 if it sends to F0 by 1. If it sends to S3, so it has to go through two ports. So for F0 by 2, for this path, it will be 19. And from it to reach to S1, the S3, it has to go through F0 by 1. So 19 plus 19 will give you the 38. The root cost as the path cost as 38. So obviously, because path 1 has the lowest path cost, it will now designate F0 by 1 port as the root port. If you remember, if you see here clearly, this is the root port. So the internal root path cost is equal to sum of all the port costs along the path to the root bridge. Now, as I told you, so if S2 has a path to S1 via S3, the total root path cost for it will be 38, because you have to calculate 19 for here and 19 for this link between S2 and S3, and 19 for the link for S3 and S1. So paths with the lowest cost will be preferred and all the others will be blocked. So here for S2, F0 by 1 will become the root port. Now, what is this root port? Usually, the port through which the traffic will be sent out to the root bridge will become your root port, and the other end of that link, will be your designated port. If you see here, that's for a root bridge, all the ports are designated ports because it is going to accept traffic through these ports. For switches S2 and S3, you can see the root port is the one through which the traffic is sent out towards the root bridge. Similarly, for S2, F0 by 1 is the root port, and for S3, F0 by 1 will be the root port. Now, if you have one end of the segment as the root port, the other end of that path or the segment will be your designated port. And I told you, all ports on the root bridge are designated ports. If it is not a root port or if it is not a designated port, then it will become an alternate or a blocked port. All ports attached to the end devices are designated ports only. So this is how you designate a port as a root port. But for this, once again, you have a little bit dilemma. We'll discuss about that. Now, what about the remaining ports? In the earlier example, I told you that for S1, S2, F0 by 1 will become a root port, and for S3, F0 by 1 will become a root port. What about this port on S3, F0 by 2? It is neither designated or it is neither root port. In that case, we will mark it as alternate port and we will put into a logical blocking state. So the ST has configured F0 by 2 port on S3 as in the alternate role. So this particular F0 by 2 port will be in the blocking state and will not forward Ethernet frames. All other inter-switch ports are in the forwarding state. So this is how STP will prevent loops happening by selecting the appropriate root ports and designated ports and keeping all the other ports in the blocking state. Now, how do you select root port from multiple equal cost paths? In the earlier example, it's quite easy. But what if there is always a chance that you might get equal cost paths? If there is a tie, how do you decide? There are 3 ways to do that. When a switch has multiple equal cost paths to the root bridge, the switch will determine a port using any of the following criteria. The first thing is lowest sender BID. The second one is lowest sender port priority. The third one is lowest sender port ID. Please remember, in each one of these cases, I'm talking about the sender, but not the receiver. I'm talking about the sender BID, sender's port priority, and also the sender's port ID. So let me check out let us look into the first one. Now, consider this scenario. So it has 4 switches, S1, S2, S3, S4, and S1 is designated as the root bridge. Okay. Now, port F0 by 1 on switch S3 and port F0 by 3 on switch S4 has been selected as the root ports because they have the root path cost to the root bridge for their respective switches. Now, S2, on the other hand, S2 has got 2 paths, right? It can go to S1 via S3 and via S4. Both the paths have equal costs. Both will come up as 38. So you have to break that tie. You have to select one port as a root port for S3 and the other port as the alternate port. Now, this tie can be broken by using the sender's BID. Now, if you see here, the bridge IDs of S3 and S4 will be used to break the tie. If you see for S2, S3 and S4. Now, the bridge ID, you can see here, has a bridge ID of 32769.5555 and S4, the bridge ID is here. It is actually clearly shown here. Now, sorry, when you consider these 2 bridge IDs, S2 will identify that S4's bridge ID is less than that of S3. So, based on the sender's BID, it will designate F0 by 1 as the root port and F0 by 2 as the alternate port because F0 by 2 deals with S3 and F0 by 1 deals with S4. So in this way, the tie can be broken off and a particular switch can select one port as a root port if there are equal costs to the root bridge. The second option is for this particular kind of scenario. There are only 2 switches and for redundancy's sake, I have 2 lines attached to it. So here, once again, the default port priority given for a Cisco switch is 128. And obviously both will have the default priority unless until set otherwise by the administrator. But in case if the administrator will set up the port priority of one of these ports on S1 to be less than 128, the port attached to that on S4 will become the root port and the other port will become the alternate port. So for S4, to designate which one of these two ports, F0 by 5 or F0 by 6 as root port, will be dependent on the port priority of these two ports. If F0 by 1's port priority is less, maybe 100 or 10, automatically F0 by 6 will become the root port and F0 by 5 will become the alternate port. Vice versa also. If F0 by 2's priority is less, F0 by 5 will become the root port. And the third one, the third way of breaking up the tie is the sender's port ID. Now, if you see the same example, I'm repeating it here. Usually port priorities remain the same, so they won't be of much help to break the tie. In that case, for S4, if you see here, F0 by 1 port ID is less than F0 by 2. So F0 by 1 corresponds to F0 by 6 port, and that is why S4 or the switch S4 will select F0 by 6 as the root port and it will keep F0 by 5 as the alternate port. So for traffic sending to S1 as the which is the root bridge, S4 will send it via F0 by 6 port. This is selected because of the lower port ID of F0 by 1 compared to F0 by 2 of S1. So these are all the ways through which you elect a root port when you have multiple equal cost paths. There are 3 timers which STP uses to do all these things. The first one is called as a hello timer. This is the interval between BPDUs. The default is 2 seconds, but you can modify it to be from 1 to 10 seconds. The second one is something called as a forward delay timer. This is the time that is spent in listening and the learning states. I'll show you what these states are. The default is 15 seconds for each, and it can be modified between 4 and 30 seconds. The last timer we use is something called as the max age timer. The max age is the maximum length of time that a switch waits before attempting to change its STP topology. Now the default given for this will be 20 seconds, but it can be modified to go up to 40 seconds. So what are these states? Check it out here. Now, STP facilitates the logical loop-free path throughout the broadcast domain. So how does it do? It actually exchanges the BPDUs between the switches to elect the root bridge, to elect the root ports, to elect the designated ports, and then block the alternate ports. For this thing to happen, it takes a little bit of time. There is some delay attached to it. So if you see here, if a switch port transitions directly from the blocking state to the forwarding state without any information regarding the full topology, it might create a temporary loop. So for this reason, to make sure that loops are not created, we have 5 port states. Even though it's showing here 4, we have 5 port states. The first state is called as a blocking state, where there is no BPDU received and the maximum age is 20 seconds. And then we go into a listening state. The forwarding delay is 15 seconds. The timer stays for 15 seconds. And then we go into a learning state. Once again, the delay is 15 seconds here. And finally, we go into a forwarding state. So the 5th state is something called as a disabled state, which is considered non-operational. So what are these states? What happens in these states? This table out. So if it is blocking, it will only receive the BPDUs. It doesn't update the MAC table and it does not forward the frames. It only forwards the frames in the forwarding state only. In the listening and learning mode, it keeps receiving and sending the BPDUs. Listening mode, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't update its MAC table and it doesn't forward the frames. In learning mode, it only updates its MAC table. It updates its MAC table, and only in the forwarding mode, it sends and receives the BPDUs and it updates the table and also forwards data frames. The disabled state, nothing happens. No BPDUs are sent or received, and there is no update, and it does not forward any data. Okay. So there is also something called as PVST, which stands for per VLAN spanning tree. So here, the STP can be configured to operate in an environment with multiple VLANs. So for each and every VLAN, you can create a separate instance of STP. So there is a different root bridge for every VLAN, and there is a different STP for an individual VLAN. If all the ports are assigned to VLAN by default, usually, there is only one spanning tree instance. So PVST stands for per VLAN spanning tree. Let us talk about the evolution of STP. So there is a table which I brought out here, which shows you the different versions of STP, which people usually work with. The first is the normal one, which is the original IEEE 802.1d version. The next one is PVST plus. where it is the per VLAN spanning tree, which is a Cisco's enhancement of the STP, which provides a separate spanning tree instance for each VLAN configured. There is something called as 802.1d in 2004, which is an updated version of STP standard. The next one is something called as RSTP, a rapid spanning tree protocol, which I will explain in a few minutes, which is an evolution of STP, which has faster convergence than STP. Rapid PVST Plus is a Cisco's enhancement of RSTP that uses PVST Plus and provides a separate instance of 802.1W per VLAN. The remaining two are MSTP and MST. MSTP stands for Multiple Spanning Tree Protocol, which is once again IEEE standard, which is been inspired by the Cisco's proprietary multiple instance STP, which is MISTP implementation. The last is the MST Multiple Spanning Tree, which is a Cisco's implementation of MSTP, which can provide up to 16 instances of RSTP and combines many VLANs with the same physical and logical topology into a common RSTP instance. We call it as multiple spanning tree, MST. Now, why we need to bother about to learn these things? Because RSTP is very fast. It is an evolution of the original STP standard. So it actually uses the same STA algorithm to determine the port roles and topology. It increases the speed of recalculation the spanning tree when the layer 2 network topology changes. It can actually configure and it gets a very much faster convergence in a matter of milliseconds. If a port is configured to be an alternate port, it can immediately change it to a forwarding state without waiting for the network to converge. As I told you in the earlier slide, Rapid PVST Plus is the Cisco implementation of RSTP on a per VLAN basis. With Rapid PVST Plus, an independent instance of RSTP runs for each VLAN. Now, this is a comparison of STP and RSTP. The first thing is done in port states. In STP, we have 5 states we just discussed: disabled, blocking, listening, learning, and forwarding. Whereas in RSTP, the disabled, blocking, listening are merged into one state called as discarding state. Okay. And coming to the port roles, in STP, we have only 3 port roles, whether it is a root port, designated port, or a blocked port. Whereas in RSTP, we have an additional one: root port, designated port, backup port, and an alternate port. Now, what is the difference? If you see here, the alternate port has an alternate path to the root bridge. The backup port is a backup to a shared medium like a hub, but it is not much relevant because we don't use hubs anymore nowadays. Okay, so there are 2 other terms that we need to understand, something called as port fast and BPDU guard. Usually when I spoke about timers, I told you there is a 15-second forward delay timer for both your listening and learning states. This might be okay for some networks, but in some cases where when you are using a DHCP client and a server based, this 30 seconds is too much of a time. Within these 30 seconds, it might expire and then IPv4 client might not get a valid IPv4 address. In those cases, what we can do is we can configure a switch port with port fast. With port fast, if it is configured with port fast, that port transitions from blocking to forwarding state immediately, avoiding this 30-second delay. Now, this port fast can be used on access ports to allow devices connected to these ports to access the network immediately. But this port fast should be used only on the access ports. If you use this on the ports connecting between switches, you risk creating a spanning tree loop. Now, when you actually enable a switch port as port fast, it should never receive the BPDUs, because it is when you start receiving the BPDUs, it can create the spanning tree loop. Now, Cisco switches support a feature called as BPDU guard. When you enable the BPDU guard, it puts the switch port into an error disabled state upon receipt of the BPDU. That means it is not supposed to receive it. If you are receiving it, then it will put it into a error disabled state. So what it does is this actually protects against potential loops by effectively shutting down the port. The administrator must manually put the interface back into service. We will learn about this port fast and BPDU cards in the next module also. We have a packet tracer implementation to show you how these things work. Coming to the last slide, what are the other alternatives? So over the years, the network has been evolved. So earlier days, a network used to have a couple of switches interconnected, then a single router. to nowadays where we have a sophisticated hierarchical network design, which includes access, distribution, and core layer switches. Along with the networks, STP has also been evolved. STP has adapted to the added redundancy and complexity with enhancements as part of RSTP and MSTP. Now, an important aspect of network design is fast and predictable convergence when there is a failure or change in the topology. Spanning tree does not offer the same efficiencies and predictabilities provided by lower routing protocols at layer 3, but it does a good job at layer 2 topologies. With that, I take a leave and thank you all for watching this video of spanning tree protocols. We'll have a packet tracer activity on this particular concept also for better understanding. Thank you very much and good luck.